I've always heard the stories about the old house at the end of Maple Street. Growing up, every kid in the neighborhood would talk about it like it was some kind of rite of passage. "You're not brave unless you go inside," they'd say. The house had been empty for as long as anyone could remember, windows shattered, roof caved in some places. People claimed it was haunted, that something lived in there, waiting for anyone foolish enough to enter. I never believed any of it. Ghosts, curses, those are things for horror movies and campfire stories, not real life. But still, there was something about the house that always gave me the creeps. Maybe it was the way it loomed at the end of the street. Forgotten and decaying, like it was waiting for someone to come in. It was just a house though. Right? That's what I kept telling myself when my friends dared me to go inside. It was a Friday night, and we were all sitting around at Jake's place, bored out of our minds. "Bet you wouldn't last 5 minutes in there," Jake said, grinning at me from across the room. "I bet he wouldn't even last 2, chimed in Tommy, laughing. "I'm not scared of some old house," I shot back, trying to sound tough even though the thought of going in there made my stomach twist. "It's just a bunch of stories." "Prove it then," said Jake, leaning forward. "Go in, stay for 5 minutes, and we'll stop calling you a chicken for the rest of the year." "Fine," I said, standing up before I could change my mind. "But when I come back, you guys owe me a pizza." Tommy chuckled. "Deal. But don't come crying to us if you see Old Man Hayward in there." I rolled my eyes. Old Man Hayward doesn't exist. He's just part of the legend to scare little kids. "Then this should be easy for you, right?" Jake said, raising an eyebrow. "The thing is, I've never been one to back down from a challenge. Especially not when my friends are watching. So, with my heart pounding in my chest, I grabbed my phone and jacket, and headed toward the house, with Jake and Tommy trailing behind me. They weren't brave enough to go inside, but they'd stand at the gate and wait for me. The house looked even worse up close. The porch was sagging, the front door barely hanging on its hinges. Weeds had grown up through the cracks in the walkway, and the whole place smelled like mildew and rot. "Go on," Jake said, standing at the gate with a smirk on his face. "What are you waiting for?" "Don't let the ghosts get you," Tommy added, laughing nervously. I turned and shot them both a look. 5 minutes, I said, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight. "I'll be out in 5 minutes." I stepped onto the porch, and the wood creaked under my weight. For a second, I thought it might collapse, but it held. The front door was half open, so I gave it a push and it swung inward with a loud groan. The smell hit me even harder as I stepped inside, a mix of mold, dust, and something else. Something metallic, like blood, but not quite. "See? Nothing to it," I muttered to myself, shining my light around the entryway. The floor was covered in debris, broken furniture, pieces of wood, shattered glass. The walls were peeling, and there were deep scratches in the paint that looked too deliberate to be from age. "Creepy," I whispered, "but still, just a house. Nothing supernatural here." I moved further inside, stepping over the remains of what looked like a broken chair. The air was heavy, thick with dust and decay. My flashlight flickered for a second, and I smacked it, trying to keep the light steady. "Don't you dare die on me," I muttered to my phone. There was a long hallway ahead, leading deeper into the house. The shadows seemed to stretch out as I stared down it, making it look endless. I took a deep breath, my footsteps echoing unnervingly as I started walking down the hall. The silence was oppressive. No sounds of the outside world, no cars, no wind, not even the usual creaking of old wood. About halfway down the hallway, I heard something. It was faint, like the shuffle of footsteps or the rustle of fabric. I froze, holding my breath, and listened. For a moment, there was nothing, just the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then, there it was again, a soft, almost rhythmic tapping, like something was moving just out of sight. "Probably just an animal," I whispered, more to myself than anything else. I kept moving, but the sound seemed to be following me. My flashlight flickered again, and I felt a sudden chill, like the temperature had dropped by several degrees. I turned a corner and entered what must have once been the living room. There was an old, moth-eaten couch against one wall and a fireplace with a mirror above it, caked in dust. That's when I saw it. In the reflection of the mirror, there was something standing behind me. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I turned around, I felt my heart stop. There was a figure, shadowy and tall, standing at the end of the hallway. Right where I had just walked through. I couldn't make out any details, its face was hidden in the darkness, but I could feel it staring at me. Watching, my throat tightened, and my breath caught in my chest. Hello? I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The figure didn't move, but I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing down on me, suffocating me. I took a step back, my heart racing, and then another. The floor creaked under my feet, but the figure remained still, like it was waiting for something. I turned and bolted for the door. I don't know what it was, instinct, fear, or something else, but I knew I had to get out of there. My legs felt heavy, like I was running through quicksand, but I forced myself to keep moving. I could hear the sound of footsteps behind me now, faster and heavier, like it was chasing me. Get out, get out, get out, I muttered to myself, my voice shaking as I sprinted toward the front door. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I burst through the front door and stumbled onto the porch, nearly tripping over the broken boards. Jake and Tommy were still at the gate, their faces pale as they watched me. What the hell happened? Jake asked, his voice shaky. I bent over, trying to catch my breath. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. There was something in there, I gasped, pointing back toward the house. I saw something. I'm not going back in. Tommy looked past me, his face pale. Dude. Look. I turned around slowly, dread filling my stomach. The figure was standing in the doorway, barely visible in the shadows. It didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me, even from a distance. We need to go, I whispered, grabbing Jake and Tommy by the arms and pulling them away from the gate. Now. We ran. We didn't stop until we were halfway down the street, gasping for air and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was that Old Man Hayward? Tommy asked. His voice trembling. I don't know, I said, shaking my head. But whatever it was, it wants me back. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure standing in the doorway, waiting. Watching. I moved away from the neighborhood a few months later, but even now, I can still feel its presence, like it's waiting for the right moment to find me again, and I know it will. It's funny how some of the scariest things in life start with a dare. Or maybe it's not funny at all, maybe it's just the way we test ourselves, or the way we feel the need to prove something to others. Either way, this all started because I didn't want to back down. And because I thought the stories were nothing but rumors. Everyone in town knows about the old bridge on Cedar Creek. It's the kind of place you hear stories about growing up, stories that don't seem to have an exact beginning, but everyone just knows them. Some say a woman drowned under the bridge years ago, and now her ghost haunts it, waiting for someone to cross at the wrong time. Others say there was once a gruesome accident there. And if you stand on the bridge alone after midnight, you'll hear the screams of those who died, but the most common tale, the one that's repeated the most, is about the footsteps. They say if you stand on that bridge after midnight, you'll hear footsteps behind you, footsteps of something that isn't human anymore. Something that wants to take you away. Just a story, I told myself, over and over again. It's just a story. But standing there on that dark night, looking down at the creek flowing silently beneath the old wooden planks, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Even though it was the middle of summer, the air around the bridge felt colder, almost damp with an eerie chill that didn't belong. Are you gonna do it or not? Mark called from behind me, his voice breaking through the stillness. Yeah, come on, said Sarah, who stood beside him, shifting her weight nervously from one foot to the other. We don't have all night. I'm doing it, I snapped, not because I was angry at them but because I needed to convince myself. I wasn't going to back down, not now, not after I'd come this far. It's just a stupid bridge. You guys are acting like I'm walking into a graveyard. Mark snorted. You might as well be. Look, if you chicken out, we'll understand. I mean, after all, there's a reason no one crosses it after midnight, right? Sarah nudged him. Stop trying to scare him. It's bad enough we're out here. She turned to me, her face barely visible in the moonlight. Just go, okay? 5 minutes on the bridge and you're done. 5 minutes, I repeated. That's all it was. 5 minutes standing on an old, rickety bridge at 12:01 a.m. What's the worst that could happen? I stepped onto the first plank of the bridge, and it groaned under my weight, the sound echoing in the silence. The water below was slow-moving, dark, and seemed almost too still. I could hear the wind rustling through the trees. And far off, a dog barking at something in the night. It was fine. Nothing was going to happen. I just had to stay here for 5 minutes and prove that all the stories were just that, stories. I reached the middle of the bridge and turned to look back at Mark and Sarah. They stood just beyond the edge of the bridge, watching me with a mix of curiosity and concern. See? I called out, forcing a laugh. It's just an old bridge. No ghosts. No footsteps. Nothing. Just wait, Mark shouted back. It's not even midnight yet. I rolled my eyes and turned my back to them, staring out into the dark woods on the other side. The moon was full that night, casting pale light over the trees and the water. But the shadows seemed deeper than they should have been. The air was too still, the night too quiet. A shiver ran through me, but I told myself it was nothing. Just nerves. 2 more minutes, I muttered to myself, glancing at my watch. Just 2 more. And that's when I heard it. The sound was faint at first, so faint that I almost thought I was imagining it. A soft, distant tapping, like someone walking slowly on the wooden planks behind me. My heart leaped into my throat, but I didn't turn around right away. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe the old wood shifting under the cool night air, but then the sound grew louder. Tap. Tap. Tap, footsteps. I spun around, expecting to see Mark or Sarah playing a prank, but they were still standing at the end of the bridge, too far away to be making the sound. And besides, they were staring at me, wide-eyed. Do you hear that? I called out to them, my voice shaking slightly. Sarah nodded slowly, her face pale in the moonlight. Yeah. I hear it. Mark was frowning, looking down at the wooden planks. It's probably just the bridge creaking. It's old. Don't freak out. But it wasn't just creaking. I knew the difference. This was the sound of footsteps, deliberate and steady, moving closer. I swallowed hard and turned back toward the center of the bridge. The sound stopped, just as suddenly as it had started. The only noise now was the soft rustling of the leaves and the distant sound of the creek. Hello? I called out, my voice louder than I intended. Nothing. Just the quiet night air pressing in around me. See? Mark shouted from behind. Nothing's there. You're almost done. Just another minute or 2. I nodded, though I wasn't feeling as brave as I had been a few minutes ago. Something was wrong. The air felt too thick, too heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. And there was a strange smell now, faint but sharp, like burnt wood or maybe something worse, something decaying. I checked my watch again. 12:02, 1 more minute. That's when the footsteps started again. This time, they were louder, faster, like someone, or something, was walking toward me with purpose. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I felt my hands start to shake. I turned around, expecting to see someone, anyone, standing there, but there was no one. Mark? I shouted, my voice echoing across the water. Sarah? What? Mark called back, sounding annoyed. It's just the bridge. Calm down. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The footsteps were still there, but no matter how hard I looked, there was no one on the bridge with me. And they were getting closer. 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 Without thinking, I stepped backward, my foot catching on one of the loose planks. I stumbled but caught myself before I fell. My breath came in ragged gasps now, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. Something was on this bridge with me, even if I couldn't see it. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the dare anymore. I didn't care about proving anything to Mark or Sarah. I just needed to get off that bridge, away from the footsteps, away from whatever was following me. I heard Sarah scream as I ran toward them, her voice shrill and panicked, "Look out." I skidded to a stop, nearly crashing into the railing. I turned to see what she was screaming about, and my blood turned to ice. There, standing in the middle of the bridge, was a figure. A dark, shadowy figure that I hadn't seen before. It was tall, its body thin and almost skeletal, draped in what looked like tattered, wet clothing. Its head was bowed, but I could see its eyes, two glowing, pale orbs staring directly at me from under a hood. It took a step toward me. I backed up, stumbling over the uneven planks. "Run!" Sarah screamed, her voice filled with terror. "Run, Danny!" But I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were glued to the spot. The figure took another step, its footsteps echoing loudly in my ears, louder than they should have been. Its face, or what was left of it, was pale and gaunt, with hollowed-out eyes that seemed to glow in the moonlight. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please don't." The figure stopped, its head tilting to the side as if considering me. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then it raised one bony hand, pointing toward the water below. My heart raced as I followed its gesture, looking down into the creek. At first, I didn't understand what it was trying to show me. The water looked normal, dark, slow-moving, reflecting the moonlight, but then I saw it, a face. Pale and lifeless, floating just beneath the surface of the water. It was the face of a woman, her eyes wide open and her mouth twisted in a silent scream. I felt my stomach turn, bile rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My whole body was frozen in fear. The figure took another step forward, its hand still pointing toward the water. Its eyes seemed to burn into me, demanding something I couldn't understand. "Come with me," a voice whispered, though it didn't come from the figure. It seemed to come from the air itself, soft and cold, like a breath against my ear. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I won't." "Come with me," the voice repeated, louder now, more insistent. I turned and ran. I didn't look back this time. I just ran as fast as my legs could carry me, my feet pounding against the old wooden planks, the sound of the footsteps behind me growing louder, faster. "Danny!" Mark shouted as I neared the end of the bridge. "Come on, man. Hurry." I practically leaped off the bridge, stumbling into Mark's arms. Sarah was standing just behind him, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "But we need to get out of here. Now." Mark didn't argue. Neither did Sarah. We ran back to town as fast as we could, not stopping until we were safe under the streetlights, far from the bridge and whatever had been waiting for us there. We never talked about that night again. None of us ever went near the bridge after that, but sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I can still hear the footsteps, and I know it's waiting for me.